Hi, guys. Happy Tuesday and welcome to Dharma Talk with Rabia Elahi. I am Rabia Elahi and I'm a psychotherapist based out of Houston, Texas. For any of you that are joining for the first time, the word Dharma can mean many things. It can be a purpose, your purpose. It can be right action or doing the right thing. And I created Dharma Talk so that I can share with you right and true information that I've had the privilege of having access to through education, life experience, reading, things that, a lot of us are not aware of. So I've had that privilege. And so I want to share that with you because my number one priority, always, my number one intention is that I'm of service to you and that I add to your awareness in some way. And I think that when we're informed, we have the opportunity to make better choices. And making better choices usually ends up improving our personal life and our functioning in society, in the community, in our families. We become healthier in mental and emotional ways and happier. And with increased happiness, we generally have increased kindness. And I think kindness is one of the things that we've been missing a lot in the last few years. I wanted to do today's episode on masala and mental health issues in the South Asian community. And by South Asian, I mean those of us from Indian background or Pakistani or Bangladesh. A lot of the countries in that area, we are considered South Asian or Desi. And I like the word masala because it's a combination of spices. And I think as human beings, we're all a combination of many different things. And we can always adjust the amount of something in our own masala recipe. So having said that, the main reasons I wanted to bring this to you was, number one, I'm South Asian myself. I'm a first generation immigrant from Pakistan. I've had my own difficulties with anxiety and depression, and at times acute stress responses. And I want to take away the stigma of admitting and also seeking help. I sought help. I was able to do that even against the family culture. And it has helped me tremendously. I continue getting help to this day with psychotherapy and medication. So I want to normalize that. It is like taking care of your heart or your diabetes or a broken arm. I wanted to make it like that. In the last few years, I have had more clients who are South Asian, and they've talked about what they're going through, either individually or in their families' homes, in the culture, and they say it with shame, like, "Oh, I'm depressed," or "Oh, I'm so anxious, I can't sleep, I'm eating too much or not eating enough." And there's such a sense of shame, as if they're weak-minded or they're imagining things or the family's not supportive. So I really wanted to make this conversation something that will increase our awareness and hopefully take away some of the stigma. So I have invited two very, very special guests today as my guests, and I think they will be able to add much more from their own experience, professional and otherwise. First, Dr. Zishan Samiuddin. She is a board certified psychiatrist practicing in the Houston area since the early 90s. Dr. Samiuddin, or as we call her, Dr. Sami, graduated from Gandhi Medical College in Hyderabad, India, and she completed a residency in adult psychiatry from UT Medical School in Houston. And Dr. Sami was a chief resident in her final year of residency there. She then matriculated with a fellowship in psychosomatic medicine and liaison psychiatry from the Baylor College of Medicine at St. Luke's. So I want to say she'll explain what psychosomatic is. That'll be one of the questions I'll ask her. And she was recruited as the medical director of psychiatry and substance abuse services at Thomas Street Clinic with a concurrent faculty position appointment at Baylor College of Medicine. And Dr. Sami has been in a private practice since the late 90s, for any of you needing a psychiatrist. Saima Husaini is a licensed professional counselor and supervisor with the state of Texas. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in communication from Texas A&M University in College Station, and her Master of Arts degree in educational counseling from the University of Phoenix in Phoenix, Arizona. After completing her graduate degree in Arizona, Saima was also certified as a K through 12 school guidance counselor in Phoenix. And she had the opportunity to work in the middle school system, in middle school age groups. When she moved back to Houston, Saima was also in Houston. She enrolled at the University of Houston to complete further studies in psychology, counseling psychology, and human behavior. Saima has over 10 years of experience. She is also in private practice with Hope and Harmony Therapy, where she works primarily with adults and couples, and I think families too. Saima's main aim is to encourage her clients to find or rediscover their sense of mental well-being and balance. So, having said all that, my two distinguished guests, I welcome Dr. Sami and Saima.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, everybody. Thank you.
Did I leave anything out?
Probably. I think you did a fine job.
Yeah.
You did a fine job.
Dr. Samiuddin, before we start, I want to touch on that psychosomatic. Can you explain that a little bit?
All right. So psychosomatic is sort of self-explanatory. Mm-hmm. I challenge anyone to negate the idea that the brain is a part of the human body.
Yeah.
So the brain sort of works in mysterious ways, and since it controls various functions of the body, pretty much most illnesses can be linked to the brain and behavior.
Okay.
So much of the so-called medical illnesses may have a psychological component to them. Mm-hmm. For instance, say diabetes is a behavioral illness. It mm-hmm. is caused with poor diet, poor nutrition, weight gain. All of these issues are controlled by the brain.
Yes.
So that is where the interplay between medical illness mm-hmm. and psychological well-being sort of come into play. And that was where I got my professional training in my fellowship.
So what you're saying is that stress, anxiety, the way we behave, the decisions we make in our behavior can be almost directly linked to many illnesses, physical illnesses.
You got it.
We don't normally connect.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So then what do you guys see in your practice? I know, Dr. Sami, you do psychiatry, and Saima, you're doing a lot of psychotherapy. I'm just curious what you see in your clients who are of South Asian origin?
I'm going to let Saima go first.
Thank you. Well, I see, I'm glad to see actually, and like you said, in the last few years, a lot more people from the South Asian community coming forward and seeking out this help. There's a high need for it, and there's a lot of stigma attached to seeking out psychiatric, psychological assistance and treatment because there's that stigma of what are people going to say? What is my family going to say? A lot of mental illness, things like depression, anxiety are seen as, it's all in your head. You can get over this. Sometimes religion plays a part in it. You pray and you'll be better. And so these are the narratives that people have been struggling with over many, many years. And so now there is more of an awareness and willingness to come forward and seek out professional treatment. So it's good that they are coming forward.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The stigma is sort of like a many-headed hydra.
Hmm.
So there is the very personal stigma, which is a self-stigma, where they internalize the shame that is brought about being weak or not being spiritual enough, or it's a punishment from God, or it's a sign of personal weakness. Going on to public stigma, where there's a discrimination against folks who are diagnosed with a psychiatric illness. Um, Even in my own profession, whenever we are asked to renew our license, our medical license, there's a question not about are you diabetic, do you have hypertension, but have you been diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder? So there's the stigma that goes on with that, and then there's the institutional stigma, which is governmental policies that really discriminate against people who have psychiatric disorders, and there's a systemic kind of hill that many of our patients have to climb.
Right.
Um,
Even with mental health treatment, up until recently, it wasn't covered with insurance.
Yeah.
But now it is recognized, and it's covered. Treatment is covered for mental well-being.
Which is great because to make it more accessible,
Right.
And on the other side of that, Saima, I've also heard clients saying, I don't want to use my insurance because of the institutional stigma of having a diagnosis. So try to find the most benign, because maybe it affects someone's job, and they should still have access to healthcare.
Right.
Do you see something different, like additional factors that can play in, or what are some of the most common factors that sort of play in to depression and anxiety, or are those the things you see most often?
Depression, anxiety, a lot of family dynamics, communication issues, marital issues in the community that people are coming forward with more so now. Generational differences between parents that have migrated here and the kids being raised here, those cultural differences. They're being raised.
Sorry, Simon, you broke up just a little bit. You were saying marital issues, and then it froze a little.
When parents that have migrated from their homeland to the US or the UK or some Western country, and that cultural difference, that generational difference, where the parents have a certain mindset. The kids are growing up here where they're being, they're exposed to individuality, to speak their voice, talk about emotions, whereas typically or stereotypically, culturally in South Asian cultures, we're told or we're taught to, you don't talk about it. You maybe brush it under the rug, or you pray about it, or you don't want to bring it to light because of that shame that Dr. Samiuddin was mentioning. So there's that discrepancy, that there's a lot of that confusion, like, what do I do with this? I don't know where to go. And so luckily now they're coming to mental health professionals, therapists, and trying to figure that out for themselves.
Yeah, when you mentioned the word masala, it put me in mind of the values that we are, being South Asian myself, the values that we are supposed to serve are what I call the three C's. You know, conformity, cohesion, cooperation. You know, emotional resilience, avoiding shame. And that's sort of the masala that we're given, where all of these sort of things come together, these values come together, as opposed to, say, French cooking, where each individual spice must stand on its own. So it's sort of like the values of South Asia versus the West. I'll use that for where individualism and self-determination and making sure that you follow your own path rather than conform to what the family's expectations are of you. And that's where a lot of clash comes along. And I absolutely agree with Saima that intergenerational conflict and values of respect. It was interesting. I have ran into a young man, 7, 8 year old kid, who asked me, we are asked to respect our elders. Isn't it unfair that the elders don't respect us back? You know, I don't believe that a child that was raised in India or Pakistan would ever have that kind of a thought at 7 years of age.
Not at all.
Where the conflict and the rub kind of comes along.
Right.
And mental illness is, mental issues really arise out of that kind of conflict. So thank you for bringing that issue up, Saima. It's a big one.
Right. And on that note, Dr. Sami, what you said about the respect, I hear that a lot too, where the younger generation, they say, well, I'll give respect if I get respect.
Exactly.
Which is, very something that they really grew up with. And the difference, I think, is, for South Asian communities and families to maybe explain to the kids, and I heard somebody talk about this once before, where they gave the example of giving respect versus being respectful to your elders. And I think they don't see the difference in that, the younger generation maybe. Whereas you can, if, for example, if you have a teacher, you might not like the teacher. You might not agree with what they do and how they behave, and you might not like them at all, but you'll still be respectful. You're not going to be abusive in language or derogatory or anything. You're going to continue to be respectful to a teacher. More than likely you will be, right? In most cases. So in the same context, I guess, trying to help them understand that there's a difference between wanting to be respected and then giving respect, and versus respectful to an elder, which is so much, an important component of South Asian culture, respect for elders.
I think it's a beautiful way of putting it. I hadn't thought of that. I love that.
And I think the vocabulary is sort of developing. I don't know whether there are equivalent words in Urdu or Hindi for anxiety. Parishani, jhanjat, diqqat. They don't really cover becheni. Those we haven't developed that kind of vocabulary. The sense of honor, izzat, lajja in Hindi, sense of shame. These are all supposed to be good values, but really they tend to get the problem swept under the carpet. Just you have to in the family honor, and silence equals death, as my AIDS activists would say.
Yes. I think about my family came here in the early 70s. So we were like, I think, one of the earlier families to come here, and we didn't really know any other Pakistani and Indian families. And but as the community grew, I thought what was just a culture in my family, which is you better get straight A's, you better be well behaved, and you have to be at the top of your class and number one, and all of that, become a doctor. I heard that more and more, where that's just the accepted thing. Someone sent me a meme today, my brother actually, that had Will Smith slapping Chris Rock, saying that, this is a desi parent when the kid does bad in math, and I thought, well, that's not far from the truth.
Right.
And so there's so much expectation to be put together and mentally strong and represent your culture and your family and your religion a certain way, that maybe we hide how we're really feeling inside.
Couldn't have said it better, really. And when you actually start looking at the risk factors for depression and anxiety or mental health problems in the older generation and look at the youth, they seem to be, some research has shown that social isolation, intergenerational conflict, neglect because of lack of language proficiency amongst the elders are the issues that lead them to get more depressed or anxious and express it in psychosomatic terms. My head hurts, my back hurts, my skin is not glowing enough. If you ask, I'll carry it to the opposite extreme and say, does your hair hurt? Oh, yeah, my hair hurts as well. So it's, the vocabulary is not developed enough to express emotional pain. Whereas amongst the youth, the academic pressure that's put to bear on them, their relationships, dating, choosing a partner,
Yeah.
you know, all these kind of conflicts sort of lead to risky behavior and physical symptoms that are
Yeah.
often not recognized as symptoms of depression. In psychiatry, we talk in terms of um, physical symptoms we call SIGI caps. So sleep, interest, guilt, energy, psychomotor agitation,
Mm.
suicidal thoughts, appetite, all those things. They may not be expressed in emotional terms in our the older generation.
Yeah.
Pain may be the way they express psychic pain. Physical pain is the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Well said. What have you seen as a result of the pandemic? Because there is, a lot of the community lives in like joint family systems where, son, wife, kids live with son's parents and family. And so I'm just wondering if you saw something different during the pandemic.
I think people struggled with finding space for themselves, privacy, self-care. I think the mindset is to do for the family, to do for your spouse, to do for your kids, and not really focus on yourself. And then when you have everybody there 24/7, day in, day out for the past 2 years, self-care, there's been no opportunity for that. There's been no way to have any moment or time or space for yourself. Privacy, even in the beginning when the pandemic first hit, people were struggling with telehealth because they didn't have that space to come into an office and talk openly and privately and candidly about whatever they were going through. But people are creative. They found a way to get in their car, drive somewhere in a parking lot, and have their session through their car. So that's been something that I've noticed with the pandemic.
Yeah, lots of exacerbation of domestic abuse because it's sort of like living in a pressure cooker. Folks that the relationship was tenuous to start out with, and the response is to kind of let's do more of the same. So there was emotional abuse that was going on. It amps up to physical abuse.
Mhm.
Lots more of folks relapsing on alcohol and drugs
Mhm.
after a period of sobriety because you know they weren't able to attend the meetings, and Zoom only came along later.
Yeah.
So the supports that they had to maintain the sobriety were essentially yanked out from under them.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Social isolation,
Social
all
isolation, absolutely.
kids not being with their peers, sitting in front of a
Yes.
screen, that's not healthy for anybody. So there's enough.
And I wonder if, for kids of immigrant parents, where you have that generational difference and cultural difference, if being at home further exacerbated the double life that often the younger generation, or not even younger, I mean, I was part of that too, where outside the home you have one life and inside the home you have another life. And we're all at home. So
Right.
that's just half a life,
Right.
you know?
You're often putting on a mask. You
Yeah.
have to be a certain way when you're at home with your parents and with your families, and you can really maybe be yourself amongst your peers. And
Yeah.
that was taken away. So it was that constant pressure of, I can't be myself. I can't say what I want to say. Nobody's listening to me. Who can I talk to? Was a
Yeah.
big issue.
Dr. Sammy, what have you seen as far as um, seeking proper medication or resisting medication? Um, can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, I have a hard enough time with convincing my patients to take medications
Mm,
for the most part with the mainstream American
mm,
society, patients coming from there. Um, it's more acceptable, but can you imagine if the way they think of a conceptualized illness, mental illness,
mm,
in 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 the West, and I'll just use that as a loose term. It's depression, anxiety are really characterized as chemical imbalances. So there's
mm,
something going wrong with your body, and two brain cells not talking to each other, and that downstream effects of uh, appetite problems, energy problems, sleep problems. So that's how the West sort of conceptualizes. It's a very biomedical model. However, the cons- the conceptualization of psychiatric illness in our neck of the woods
mm,
is more of a generational problem, interrelationship problems,
mm,
the stress of living in a joint family, the classic sas bahu kind of
mm,
problems that happen. So it's so that's the first issue. The other issue is, before I advise medications, I'm being asked, when do I stop these medicines?
mhm.
So
Right.
I've had this course for a month, and you can go for take say fluoxetine for at 20 milligrams for 2 weeks, and you want to get better. Well,
Mhm.
that's the best part of where you're going to have side effects.
Yeah.
The
Right.
actual benefit of fluoxetine may not accrue until 6 weeks later, maybe 12 weeks later.
Mhm.
And that's with playing around with the dosages and the timing of the medicine, and making sure that um, there are other issues there, whether they are drinking or they
Mm.
use drugs or they're taking over-the-counter medicines.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a struggle, but once patients kind of buy into that idea, um, then it's relative smooth sailing.
Mm.
It's important to remember that studies have shown that the rate of adherence to medications at 6 months is about 50%.
Okay.
So people stop their medications, half the time,
Yeah.
and then they may do well for a while,
Yeah.
but then here it comes again, and then they have to get started again. So that it takes a little bit of effort to get people on the meds and get them to stay on the meds.
And then do you also find that they're looking for sometimes only medication to fix the problem? They don't, there's it has to be, as we know, a combination of therapy along with medication. The medication to help stabilize, get them to a certain point, and then ongoing treatment, talk therapy, talking through some of the things, identifying their thought processes and understanding what are they thinking and perceiving, and how is it distorted in some way, and how can we make it more balanced for them.
You're really
So
feeding me good lines, Saima. So I often tell my patients that the medicines will help control the symptoms, but it won't give you the how-tos.
Yeah.
How do I deal with this problem? How do I make the choice that's best for me? And that's why, folks like Rabia and you have my undying respect, because the medicine part of it um, is the relatively easy part. It's being able to establish that collaborative relationship with me and with you guys, um, that will really get the patient to do better. You
Yeah.
cannot expect medications to do everything.
right.
It has to be, and in psychiatry, and I'm sure you all think of the biopsychosocial model. With our population, the South Asian population, I think I like to conceptualize it as a biopsycho-spiritual model,
Yeah. hmm
Yeah.
because that part is very important as well. So you're doing this, but go ahead and do your prayers,
Yeah.
offer up
Right.
your supplications to God,
hmm
healthy eating,
Mm.
exercise, diet, all that kind of stuff really kind of comes in.
hmm
I agree. I think the spiritual aspect for the South Asian community is such a factor, and I mean, who doesn't want one thing to just fix everything? I mean, I
Right.
would love that, but it's the combination of uh, choices and behaviors and support and self uh, uh, taking action. Like it doesn't just happen in a passive way. So I'll have people, I'm sure, Saima, you've heard this too, like, oh, well, how long is therapy going to take?
Right. Right.
Or, okay, well, I've had 2 sessions, I'm
Yeah.
good now. Or
Right.
fix me is the other one. I'm like, okay, do you go to a trainer
hmm
once and don't do anything
Right.
until you see them again? Or do you follow some sort of a plan? Because that's when the trainer is effective.
Exactly.
You still have to do the stuff on
Right.
your own. And
Right.
I think we may not think of therapy that way, you know.
Yeah.
I think, please go on.
No, I was going to say that I try to explain that they come to us to build a toolbox,
Yeah.
and we offer them the tools, and they add to that toolbox different skills and techniques to manage conflict, anger, emotion, whatever it is that they're struggling with, and then apply those tools as the situation arises. So it's for us to help them build their own toolbox, not for us to do it for them, because that's not our job.
Yeah.
But they also want that. Can you fix me? What do you want me to do?
Exactly.
I think there's multiple metaphors that we use, that because therapy is such an abstract way of thinking, that you've got to make it kind of real and concrete. And the metaphor that I use is, your therapist is going to be the person that's holding the lamp, but you'll have to do the walking, and you will have to make the choices whether you go left or right when there's a fork in the road. So oddly enough, I've had instances where the concept of therapy has not really been grasped. So, and let me go into an anecdote. This is my
Yeah.
anecdotal experience about this lady who came in. She was in her 40s. She and her husband were having issues, because she was very depressed and he was stressed because he was unemployed, and mom was living with them and a sister was living with them, and there were all kinds of pressures there. So she said her piece, and he said his piece, and she says, Dr. Saab, ab aap insaf kijiye. You do justice.
Yeah.
So, I'm not a judge. I'm
Yeah.
not going to be making decisions that way. So it was very hard to sort of delineate what my scope of practice was. And this was in my, younger and stupid days, as opposed to my older and stupid days. But you know,
Funny.
explaining these things is hard.
Yeah.
Right.
It is, and maybe it goes to that analogy of collective versus independent, and um, the way I think, the beauty I think of um, being multicultural, is taking uh, the connections that we build when we live collectively. Something that's missing right now is the sense of we're all in this together.
Mhm.
And in collective cultures, I think we have that. And so when clients, patients come in, it's not that they feel empowered to shift something in their own lives, which is more of a Western way of thinking. Is like, oh, it's not that everyone does it, but I can change something, because there's still a system,
Mhm.
usually family and culture, that prohibits or that makes changing self very scary. Like, I will be kicked out of the tribe.
Mhm.
Right. It's seen as selfishness
Yeah.
when you
Yes,
focus on yourself.
Yeah.
yes.
That's the mindset typically.
Yes.
And that's, I think, what needs to change in South Asian culture and communities, this understanding that it has to start within the individual. If you're not okay,
Mhm.
it's okay to say, I'm struggling. It's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Showing vulnerability is one of the greatest strengths we have, to say, this is where I'm at and I need help, and reaching out. So I think that's a mindset that needs to shift.
Mm.
If the problem is not acknowledged, there's nothing that we can
True.
do
Right.
about it.
Right.
Uh, and I applaud our patients that are South Asian, that have the courage and the determination to come in and see folks like us
Yeah.
and acknowledge that there's a problem. And because rather than the nail that sticks out must be hammered down, uh,
Mm.
you know that's the culture that I think we have, which is wonderful things. There's cohesion, there's lack of social isolation, because there's a network of support, which
Mm.
is suddenly lost
Yeah.
when first generation immigrants come here and they are busy uh, getting employed and fighting poverty and losing the status that they had in the mother country.
Mhm.
So our patients that have the courage and the determination to seek help with us, I think we have to approach them with from a position of humility and respect.
Absolutely.
Um,
I've seen that more lately, where parents are bringing in young adult kids or the older teenagers, and I tell them that, look, this is so courageous,
mhm.
Yeah.
and beautiful, and it shows that you're willing to consider your kids over what will people think,
Mhm.
Right.
you know, and then it ends up where the whole family does better,
Hmm.
and because they're less worried, or the kids understand the parents more, and vice versa. And I think it takes a lot of courage, for until we normalize
Yes.
getting help for things that don't mean that you're bad or being punished, or you have something to be ashamed of, or you're not strong minded enough, or you're just wanting attention.
Hmm.
I've had to explain the importance of tending to postpartum depression, because there can be isolation for the mother, even living in a joint family system,
Right.
you know, where she's also doing daughter-in-law duties
Mhm.
and tending to newborn.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it's new. It's new to hear of postpartum and what does that look like? And, you know, is my wife just wanting more attention, or is she complaining and being spoiled? Or, you know, there's all these other things
Mm-hmm.
that go into it. And I would invite anyone watching or listening to just be a little curious about when people we love complain about their hair hurting, you know,
Mhm.
or the aches and pains, or I don't have any energy, or I
Mm-hmm.
just can't seem to get out of bed. You know, I'm not sure. I must be getting sick,
Right.
you know, which may be the truth as well.
Yes.
But the connection of all of that,
Right.
God has abandoned me.
Mm-hmm.
yes, God has abandoned me.
Right. Not listening to my prayers.
He's not listening to my prayers. Exactly. There must be a fundamental defect in me, which is
Right. What am I doing wrong? I
Yeah.
must have done something, you know, that I'm getting punished for. This is
Yes.
a punishment that I'm suffering through right now. And so there's a lot of self-blame. I deserve this. Did I do something
Yes.
wrong? So,
What have I done in a previous life? You know, I actually went through that pretty severely myself when I was having my miscarriages, because the default thought was, oh, God is punishing me,
right.
you know, or he's abandoned me, he's forsaken me, you know, because I'm not this enough or that enough. And it's very painful to also feel the spiritual isolation
Right.
or disconnection,
Yes.
because family members may say, well, you shouldn't have waited so long, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we can be quite shaming.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, also in that religious context, you know, we talk a lot of people talk about destiny. Well, this is my destiny. This is what I'm supposed to be going through, and they kind of give in to that, and they feel helpless to that destiny or kismat, right?
Yeah.
But again, you have to recognize that you still have power to make choices.
Yes.
We can still choose to either fall victim to that destiny, or are we able to do something about it, take action?
Yeah, it's sometimes it's important to sort of go back to the basics. Um, and I've quoted often that of the 99 attributes of God in our faith tradition in Islam,
Mm.
most of the attributes are benevolent, kind,
Right.
someone who's compassionate. Um, in our faith tradition, also God is supposed to have the love for us
Yeah.
equal that of 50,000 mothers.
Mm.
So sometimes from the having a little bit of religious perspective can help negate or address those thoughts. Um, you know, the other I'm kind of jumping around here, so I hope you're sticking with me. It's all faith traditions, many faith traditions, the concept of punishment for
Yeah.
doing something good. In the Mahabharata, there are examples of that with Karna and Purushottam, and there's another, and the um, the Spartans and their let me not wince at all. You know, I will tolerate all the pain. I will, if I don't, then there's something wrong with me. The
Mm.
culture of silence sort of
Yes.
comes back in again, and being able to speak up about it. You're doing a service by bringing these sort of pulling the curtain on the secrecy that's involved. Um,
Yes.
Rabia, that's important.
Yeah. The secrecy, I think it hurts us
Mhm.
because, uh, you know, suffering doesn't make us more spiritual.
Mhm.
closer to God.
Right.
We don't have to suffer, you know, to be good members of the world, you know, or to be good in our family, or to give permission to maybe our kids or the younger generation that things can go wrong and we can change things.
Right.
You know, we often can't do it by ourselves,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
Mhm.
It's not it's actually quite a sign of strength
Mhm.
to ask for help,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know. Dr. Sammy, what have you heard? Because I hear this a lot, especially about antidepressants.
Mhm.
I shouldn't have to take a happy pill
Mhm.
to feel better. Oh, I'm going to get addicted, you
Mhm.
know, or I mean, outside of what will people think,
Mhm.
or I can't tell anyone. What do you, what kind of explanation do you give to those kinds of sort of self-defeating
Mhm.
beliefs?
Yeah. So essentially, one of the things that I talk about is antidepressants are not going to be like antibiotics.
Mm,
They are probably going to be more like um, antihypertensives. So you have high blood pressure, you've got to take these medications chronically. Of course, you've got to make the lifestyle changes as well. And the reason why you're able to do the kind of things that you're able to, increase your activity level and do eat better and think happier thoughts is
yes.
because the brakes are off, and
Yeah.
what is the antidepressants are sort of like a gas pedal. You press on it and things sort of start going. The machine sort of starts running.
Mm,
um, I talk with my patients about how I'm not prescribing these medications in a vacuum.
mm,
I'm prescribing these medications so that you're more functional. It's not a question of just being happier. You've
mm,
got to become more functional. You've got to be more involved in life. You're going to have to uh, get better relationships. There's going to be less conflict in your life. Your general health will improve with these, because it's a combination of the medications
yeah.
along with the therapy that will provide you with the how tos. How do I go about getting my life better? So and they are not just happy pills.
Right.
You could take a hit of cocaine and be happy for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise that.
No.
Right.
No.
A lot is, I think, bulk of my time when prescribing medications is psychoeducation.
Mm, yes.
Mhm.
And I suspect you do the same thing, both of you and therapists in general, is talk about these are, you'll be making the changes, I'll be helping you along,
Mm,
I'll provide you with the toolbox, you will have to put the cards together, choose your metaphor.
yeah.
Right. And a lot of times they come up, they struggle with, it's going to make me a different type of person, or I'm not going to be the same person,
Mhm.
or the side effects that are often associated
Yes.
with different medications, because everybody responds differently to the different medications
Right.
because their own chemical makeup. So I often tell them that, it's important to follow up with your doctor regularly,
Mhm.
take the medication as prescribed, don't miss doses because
Mhm.
that doesn't help you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And really monitoring that. And I also try, when I'm working with families, to help the family understand that if you're seeing behavioral changes, let's say for somebody who's struggling with bipolar disorder, and you see a shift happening, the patient may not recognize that, but
Mhm.
the family will.
Yes.
So to take that as not criticism, or it's coming from a place of, bad intent, that if they say, "Hey, I think we need to go see your doctor. I think you should make an appointment," that's them showing their concern and care,
Yes.
and really, being mindful of that.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think and again, it's a question of really supporting the patient, because they've taken this huge step in acknowledging that there's a problem and then seeking the help
Yeah.
when there are so many forces acting against them.
Mhm.
So being able to get that kind of support from my therapist colleagues
Mm,
really helps me kind of help the patient. So it's not really a single person. It's a team of people. It does take a village.
Yeah.
You,
Mhm.
I mean, you fill that in.
Um, you said something. Sorry, it'll come back to me.
Mhm.
It takes a village. Oh, yes. About when someone complains to a family member that I don't feel good,
Mhm.
you know, the judgment or the shame that parents might feel if their child or adult child, what have I done wrong
Mhm.
thing, and maybe sweep things under the rug, where really you've done something right if your kid is coming to you
Right.
and expressing themselves,
Mhm.
you know?
It requires a change in mindset
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
where
Right.
where asking for help is is regarded as a sign of strength rather
Yeah.
than, oh, see how weak I am.
Yes.
Mhm. Mhm. And if children are acting up or acting out, it's not necessarily that they're just misbehaving,
Hmm.
that but the muse. They're
Mhm.
they're acting out for there's something going on
Yeah.
most of the time. It's because they
Yes.
can't verbalize it. They can't really say it. So it comes out in other forms. If their grades are dropping in school, if they're, things or there's other social issues going on in school.
Mhm.
So those are all indicators. And I think, in the South Asian community, as in all parents should recognize those things. Like if you're seeing changes, negative behavioral changes in your child, there's something going on beneath that, most likely.
And I think one of the things that might be helpful to convey to the parents is, your children are not really a reflection of you.
Yeah.
What they're doing may have nothing to do with the way you are raising them. Each child is an individual unto themselves, and if they are acting up or they're misbehaving, batamizi, like you said, Saima,
Mhm.
it may have nothing to do with what you are doing. Um, you know, it may have something to do with being bullied at school, for instance, and that's why
Yeah.
the child feels safe enough to let go and act out at home
Right.
because they can't do that at school.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know,
Correct.
the bulk of our work is done in reframing things, right?
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah. I do, and we only have a few minutes left, and maybe this will be a part two or a continuation, because I really do want to talk about the increase in drug use in the South Asian community. I've seen much more
Yeah.
of that, especially with weed, marijuana, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about um, suicide being sort of culturally okay. Um, and I say that because I grew up with Bollywood films where if he didn't marry you, you would kill yourself, and it wasn't seen. And maybe signs that families can look out for, because I do think suicide amongst South Asians has increased. The latest stats that I read, especially amongst women, South Asian females. So I'm planting some seeds for further discussions. But quickly, can either of you comment or say anything about that? Either of those particular things?
I think I've seen that there's a lot of pressure, as South Asians, there's a stereotype of
Mhm.
being smart, being successful, doing well, finding your field and, running with it. And when you don't meet those expectations that are there of the family, of society, then you feel like a failure. Like I didn't get there. I didn't meet those standards. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And that might be contributing to some of those higher rates, that pressure, that inability to achieve those expectations.
Yes. Yes.
And not, again, the the circle of silence.
Mm.
Mhm.
Um, something that the shame of not doing well enough,
Hmm.
to where the pain is so great that you want out, and even if it means that you kill yourself or you end your life to avoid that shame or deal with that pain, then that's a more preferable option.
Right.
The whole model minority kind of thing that we're sort of, you know, expected to conform to.
Yes.
So if you're not a doctor, well, then you're a failure. The black and white kind of thinking that, you guys do so much CBT
Mm.
with, it's an either I'm a successful financial planner,
Mhm.
or um, I'm a total failure and don't deserve to be alive.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of that pressure to represent, to please,
Mhm.
elders. I think until my dad passed, he still didn't know exactly what I did
Mm.
for a living. Like, oh, she talks. He couldn't really explain,
Right.
what therapy was,
Right.
and
And
some of the benefits.
career success, financial success is one thing, but also, if you fail at your marriage,
Mm.
um,
Yeah,
there's a huge stigma still.
yeah,
It's changing, but there's still in a lot of families a big sense of shame if you don't have a successful marriage and you want out, and divorce is not an option.
yeah.
Unfortunately, the other option is, the latter to end your life. So that has to be part of what's going on.
Yeah,
Yes, yes,
agreed.
yeah.
So, if there is one message that you want to make sure anyone watching, uh, one message that you think, okay, I've got to let them know this, what would that be?
Stand up, speak up, defeat shame, get the help that you need. Even if you think you don't need it, get
Yeah,
assessed.
Right. And not to be too concerned about what everybody is going to say, you
yeah,
know, be concerned about what you can share with everybody so that they don't feel alone and you're not the only one suffering. It's okay to talk about it.
so maybe then for Muslims, they're practicing some of the qualities we give to God, kindness and compassion and um, unconditional love.
Mhm.
For me, I think secrecy, what both of you are saying, is speak up, and that it's not shameful to not feel okay or not be okay. It's not shameful to go through life, and you're not sailing through, the
Mhm.
breeze.
Right.
It's okay to not be okay.
Right.
It's okay to not be okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Mhm. Right.
So I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. This is such a topic so close to my heart, and I couldn't think of two better people to bring your wisdom to this conversation. Anything else you want to say before we close?
It's been an honor. Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed this discussion. It
Yeah.
was illuminating, and I hope it was helpful
Right.
for those of our folks that are struggling.
Right.
Yes.
So needed in our community. And I'm really glad you have this platform. We have this platform, and there's so many of us from the South Asian community as therapists, as psychiatrists who are there to help people from our community because we understand the culture. We can understand the religious aspects of it.
Mhm.
So there's that familiarity that they
Yeah.
can feel comfortable and safe with us.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Well, thank you both. And to those of you watching, I want to let you know that none of us does this life thing alone. We are interdependent and we are all connected. And your feelings and your life and your thoughts, they all matter because you are a gift, you are a miracle just to be here. So I thank you guys for watching. I thank you, Saima, Dr. Sammy, And I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Rabia.